Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Rogue Macro. We have another Monday macro live stream here. We're going to go through a few things: charts, Strait of Hormuz, GDP numbers from around the world, who's most affected by this Strait of Hormuz shutdown, quote, like slash not shutdown, and then take a look a little bit about demographics at the end. Let me share screen with Telegram. I am live streaming on YouTube, Kick, X, and Telegram. You guys can find me anywhere there. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, comment down below. I'll make sure to be watching the Telegram chat as well if you guys want to put your stuff in there. Let me just make sure I got it all lined up. And let's get into some charts first. roguemacro.substack.com. Check it out. That's the website for all my macro content. Also, bitcoinandmarkets.com is my other blog, and you guys can follow there for more Bitcoin centered content. But all right, let's take a look at the charts really quick on Bitcoin. 8 days in a row, it looks like we are positive. I saw somebody saying that's the first time in a long time. And last time this happened, 8 days positive, we actually pulled back significantly. But we are breaking out right here. We'll see if we can hold this. I mean, is this a breakout yet? Drawn this way, it's not. But if we draw it flat across the top here, we are looking at a breakout of this local area. I think it's about time. I mean, we've been seeing a lot of fundamentals for Bitcoin continue to be strong and strengthen, and so that should be what we expect. All right, let's take a look at gold. Gold down Thursday, Friday. Today, pretty weak. If we draw a trend line right here, we can see that gold has broken down out of this, and we will see where that goes. I think this is going to end up still being a generational top up here. We probably see some rotation out of gold and into Bitcoin, but that's not a one-to-one. That's just a kind of a mental rotation from one to the other. The dollar is breaking above 100. That red line is right on 100. We did close above that significantly. It was the highest close in a long time. Let's see, when was the last close that we had above 100? Was all the way back here, May 16th last year. Holy cow. So 10 months. That's the highest close in 10 months on Friday. We are back down today, but we will see where that ends up. We had some closes here. Oh, wait, you guys couldn't see back in May. So this is the last one here, May 16th. It closed up here, and then these closed down below 100 on those days. But okay, these in the middle here, they did close above. This closed above 100, just barely. Really reacted down after that. Tried to break it here. I thought we were going to end up breaking it at this point, but we did then make a new low, and we are back up to 100. So we'll see where this goes. There's no threat right now of the dollar weakening dramatically, in my opinion. All of this stuff in Hormuz is actually positive for the relative U.S. economy. Not the absolute U.S. economy, maybe, but relatively, which is what the DXY is, right? The DXY is the dollar relative to the other major currencies, mainly the euro, but also the yen and the Canadian dollar. So relative to other currencies, the dollar should strengthen in this area. Absolutely. Okay. We do have some other dollar measurements. Like this is a trade weighted dollar. Let me make this black if I can real quick. Okay, so we did fall out of this trend, trying to come back up, maybe back testing some of these levels. Like if we draw this line, we draw a line like about here, the bottom of this formation, we're kind of back testing this breakdown of the trade weighted dollar. Now this is a better one because it's by our trade partners, and I think every 2 years it's rebalanced. So where the DXY is 60% the euro, and that's never rebalanced. It's just the reason why it's 60% euro is because it was so, it had the mark franc, the lira, all these other European currencies that are rolled into one euro. That's why it's 60% euro, and it's never rebalanced. This trade weighted dollar is rebalanced every couple years, and so we get a much more accurate strength of the dollar picture in this trade weighted dollar. This includes the yuan, um, the rupee, and other current, and the Mexican peso, importantly. So the it's more accurate with what the dollar is actually doing. So we will watch this, but also we've seen a big shot up here in recent days. If we zoom out on the trade weighted dollar, I mean, it's much higher than it was post COVID, much higher than it was pre COVID. So the trade weighted dollar is not in any threat of like collapse or anything like that. We are still in this general uptrend, and we will be for the foreseeable future. And that's mainly because of the way the system is created. We have a credit based system, so people think if you reject the dollar is going to weaken. Not really, okay? Because the more that you reject a dollar, the smaller the supply gets, because the supply depends on expansion. If the dollar is not expanding, it's contracting because it's credit. People are paying off debt constantly. Let's say the amount of repayment of the total debt in the world is 2 to 5% a year. Well, that's the entire the new credit created every year is also a flow of 2 to 5% or even slightly more. So the supply is constantly growing. If it's not growing, the supply is shrinking. So you can't collapse the dollar by de-dollarizing. You actually strengthen the dollar by de-dollarizing. It's a weird way that the system works, and 99.9% of people don't understand that. Okay, how about the US 10-year? This one has been all over the place, but in general, it has been flat. We've talked about this in recent weeks. I mean, it's just kind of oscillating around this level of 4.1 to 4.2. Where it ends up, I think ultimately it's going to break lower. Um, it will can only sustain a higher level here if growth is there to sustain it. The same way with oil prices, which we'll get to right next after this. If to have higher interest rates, you have to have higher growth to sustain it in a credit-based system. If you don't have higher growth, the eventual path is lower because you have to have higher growth to pay off higher interest rates or to service higher interest rates. If you have low growth, the interest rate's going to be low. It's that's the way these things work. Same with oil. If we go to oil, um, oil is back under 195. I said there was going to be some oscillations here, some up and some down, and yada yada yada. But overall, the general idea is going to be for oil to return to that $70 a barrel, I think, over the next few months. As soon as this Hormuz stuff gets straightened out, if it gets straightened out, um, this is just going to really quickly come down because overall, guys, this we are not in a situation of peak oil. So remember, peak oil is about the amount of oil we can pump out of the ground. They have claimed that it's going to peak. That's what peak oil is. Peak oil is a peak amount of oil that we can take out of the ground every year. Of course, they've been exactly wrong on that for so many decades. We continue to find more reserves. We continue to increase the supply of oil every year that's flowing out of the ground. And so we don't have a supply issue from that perspective, that it's not a limit on how much oil there is. It's a limit on shipping. It's a limit on how much oil can get delivered. So it's a financial limitation. It's not a supply and demand issue. Supply is abundant. Demand is weak. Marginal demand is weak. Supply is abundant. So price should tend downward. Right now, we're dealing with a delivery problem, which is a financial situation. It's not a supply and demand fundamental economic situation. So anyway, that's where oil is right now. Again, back down under 100. Did it close above 100? It didn't even close above 100 on Friday. 99.30, opened higher, back down to 95, and probably trending lower. We'll see. Okay, and S&P 500, rounding top we've talked about. We'll see where this goes, but right now I can't say that we're going to fall off a cliff, and I can't say we're going to take off instantly. So I mean, it seems like kind of a wishy-washy situation. Let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. But what I'm still ruling out some things. I'm ruling out a collapse. I'm ruling out, instantly turning around right here. So a wait and see is a prediction. Is a prediction. Same thing I've been saying about PMIs. If we go to, this is a proxy for the business cycle, and my general, there we go. My general prediction for this was, oh, let me bring this back. Hope you guys could see all that. I wasn't paying attention. Um, my general prediction for this was to just maintain right here, somewhere barely positive to barely negative. That was the base case, and that is a prediction. I know it's not as flashy as saying, guys, like Luke Groman, making some intricate linear theory that's going to collapse everything, and we're going to Armageddon and doom and destruction. That is pretty much ruled out here. Okay, it's also ruled out that we probably make it up to 60. I don't think we'll make it up to 60 on the PMIs anytime soon either. So we're in this kind of weird sideways momentum on all these markets, and that definitely is a prediction. You have to find yield somewhere else. Products like Stretch or products like other corporate debt that is having a good yield might be a good place to start looking for that yield, or defense companies, whatever. I put out a whole portfolio just the other day. It's called the Reindustrialization Portfolio. You can find that at roguemacro.substack.com. Okay, let's take a look at comments. See if you guys on Telegram are saying anything. No? Okay. So that's the charts. What else do I have to get into here on Monday? Hormuz. So let's go into the tweets. And Telegram. Oh, you know what, Telegram? I was not even sharing the right thing with you, was I? Hopefully you're seeing the right thing. Okay, so this is Twitter. Let's go into some of these things about Hormuz. This is a big one. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger. So the world's biggest oil consumers, the US, 20 million barrels per day. I think it's slightly more than that, but we are largely self-sufficient. We produce about 14 million barrels per day of oil, but we produce much more than that other 6 million barrels per day equivalent in natural gas. So we can export some natural gas and import some oil. So we are largely self-sufficient. And again, then if you now include Venezuela in this and other things, we are very much largely self-sufficient. We're not taking really anything through the Strait of Hormuz. I think it's like 1% of the traffic through the strait is US bound. So uh, we are very largely self-sufficient. China, they need 15 million barrels per day. Oh, and guys, if you were in Telegram and you were listening to my rant beforehand, you can also see this. This puts that purchasing power parity stuff to shame as well. So China is supposed to have a much higher purchasing power parity, yet we know that their economy is less robust because they just demand less energy. 54% from the Middle East. So they are highly, highly vulnerable to a shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz. India, 5 million barrels per day, heavily exposed. Japan, 3.3, almost zero domestic production. South Korea, 2.5, same problem. So the four most vulnerable economies consume 26% of daily oil. They all depend on the strait that's now effectively closed. The US consumes the most, but we produce enough energy to be a net energy exporter. Da, 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 da. So, so who's going to be hurt worse by this straight shutdown? A lot of people are saying that the U.S. did not plan for this. This is absurd. Now they're even doing the opposite. So Besant is out there saying, "Look, we could not. We're right now we're letting oil through to get to China to stabilize global markets. But what's implied there is that they don't have to. I have a tweet about that here. So, war is dynamic and you don't always have to roll with your plan. Plans can change, but definitely we planned for this. Let me find this here. Okay, so here is Besant. The U.S. is allowing Iranian oil tankers to pass through the Strait of Hormuz to help maintain global supply. From Scott Besant on Monday. Tanker traffic has fallen after Iranian attacks on commercial ships in the Persian Gulf, but Iran continues exporting about 1.5 million barrels of oil per day through the strait. Besant said traffic could increase before U.S. and allied naval forces begin escorting commercial vessels. Some tankers bound for India and possibly China have already left the Gulf. So, again, back up to this top statement. They're allowing Iranian oil tankers. So, what did I say? I said this one, if we can find it now. Where was it? Come on. Come on. All right. What if the U.S. shuts the strait for outbound oil to China? Geopolitical analysts have long talked about the vulnerability of China to checkpoint blockades. Remember, one of the things we've talked about on this show for a long, long time is the fact that China relies on imports for their necessities, for food and energy. They import something like 50% of their food and they import more than 50% of their energy. They are vulnerable to these types of attacks. Make sure this is lined up properly now. Ah, not lined up perfect. Let's go to this view. There, that's better. Sorry, guys. On the stream. Okay, so um, they're vulnerable to imports of necessities where the US is not. And we've talked a lot about blockading the Strait of Malacca or the Strait of Hormuz to as a geopolitical tactic against China. So, in the dynamics of war, in a dynamic environment, we could have these best laid plans. We've executed the plans of destroying the Iranian Navy, destroying a lot of their drone and ballistic missile capability, 99% probably at this point. And so we've had these plans for how to secure the strait. But the best laid plans, situations arise in a dynamic war. And now we're in a position to actually go about cutting off China. And Trump came out, I think it was on Friday, he came out and said, hey, all of these countries need to come help with the Strait of Hormuz. You are much more economically vulnerable here, not us. We are not exposed to the shutdown of the strait. You're exposed. And so they're not going, and China has not responded. Many countries have responded, say they are not going to help. And so the US could say, hey, okay, well, we're going to leave it closed. And we're not going to allow China to come through either. We're not going to allow these shadow fleet tankers to come through to deliver to China. So now China's squeezed even more. This has also a lot to do with the speculation that this is the best time for China to move on Taiwan. No, it's not. You need oil to prosecute a war. And if they're not getting their oil out of Hormuz, this would be the perfect opportunity for the US to just be like, oh, you're going to take Taiwan? You're not getting any oil out of Hormuz or even out of the Red Sea. We're just going to blockade all that. Anything bound for China. So they're much more exposed than the United States economically here, and that's what I am looking at. All right, let me see what else I have. Okay, I had a little bit of a back and forth with Luke Groman. So let's go up here. And see what we can find. We're going to talk about Tucker, but we're going to talk about him in a little bit. Okay. So let's go up. Oh, So Pinecone Macro, they're a bunch of fear mongers as well. So remember this leaked. I think this was Friday, March 12th. So like Thursday. Basent said it was always in out plan. Okay, so it was always an in and out plan. U.S. Navy and International Coalition would have to escort tankers. All right. Why was it in the plan to wait a month? So Pinecone Macro saying that they didn't plan, basically, that there was some sort of weird thing going on here that, we didn't know exactly what we were going to do with the strait, and yada, yada, yada. Luke Groman responded because it wasn't in the plans. He made it explicit. The plan was we bomb them 48 hours and the regime collapses. There was no plan beyond that. It's just absurd, right? I say, an Iran operation has been war gamed for decades. And I saw some of it when I was in the military myself. You can't honestly believe they had a 48-hour plan and that was it. So he's implying like criminal ineptitude. And I say it's projection. He's the one that's projecting ineptitude here. Okay. Because he thinks that there was no plan. He says, I'm repeating what I am told by people. Okay. So, and I said, this is classified material we're talking about. Think for a second. Would the most competent war fighters over the last 40 years not have a detailed plan for this? When I was in as a low mid level officer, we'd simulate these things in training. What you're describing is total incompetence. And he goes on. He tries to show that he's basing this stuff on other things and that he's just repeating. Just apply common sense. You've bought America is a dunce propaganda. The most lethal fighting force in the world is a dunce. That's what he wants us to believe. Tim Shealy, the same senator who recently snapped a USMC veteran's arm in half. Okay, this veteran was making a scene and being, out of order, and he was trying to be removed, and he was resisting that. So this is kind of a red herring that he's throwing in here. I'm simply telling you what people on the ground in DC are being told. And I said, you're doing more than that. You're claiming a nonsensical argument that they didn't plan for Hormuz closure. That's what you're claiming, that they didn't plan for this. Okay. Let me find where I keep responding to him. I didn't read all these because it's just I stand corrected. The plan was apparently to have China send ships. No, this is a new plan. This is a dynamic war event. Okay. In war, things happen, opportunities present themselves, and you're going to be able to shift. And this is an incredible shift that Trump has made. I said, you're pretending to not understand the difference between a plan and dynamic execution. They obviously planned. He said it wasn't in the plan. Remember? Going back to his first tweet, it wasn't in the plan. I say, you are pretending to misunderstand this. It's been a high threat for decades. Just think for a second. Iran has no navy left. Naval capacity reduced to near zero. Seems like they planned. No new attacks in 5 days. That's true. There have been no new attacks in 5 days. Ships are making it through now if they try. Trump is calling the bluff of the other countries. War is dynamic. Turning a setback into a geopolitical weapon is understandable. And he's saying, we have destroyed Iran's navy. So the Strait of Hormuz is open, right? Right? I mean, that's so stupid. He's changing the goalposts from a plan to a physical part of what's happening, actual execution. Of course, there was a plan. This is about planning. You think there was no planning for 40 years or the last few months leading up to the conflict. That's an absurd claim. Okay, he says 40 years of planning, and yet, I mean, it's just moving the goalposts. So I'm glad we agree you were wrong. Lord, Lord, Lord. Okay, so that's it for Luke Groman. Let's go on to the next topic. Be interested to see what if you guys have any comments about that. Um, okay, Spock has something here. Crazy Tom Luongo said the other day something that made sense. Venezuela's heavy oil is perfect for a sea fleet offensive. It's bunker, most asphalt, almost asphalt. W- ex- Clarify that. So he said that the other day something made sense. Venezuela's heavy cruise sea fleet offensive. Um, I think this whole situation and the back to back here, there was obviously thought put into this. Invasion was planned. They stationed 30% of the fleet there. Yeah, this was totally planned. Venezuela was planned, executed perfectly. Iran was planned, executed almost perfectly. I think there were some problems, like they thought that there was going to be more people in that initial bombing that they did to kill the original Ayatollah. I think that they had, uh, a few mistakes throughout. But to say that they didn't plan for Hormuz is just so absurd. To question his macro credentials in total, like what is he doing? What is he saying about this? This is craziness. All right. Let's go back in. Let's dive in here and say, where am I at? Okay. So GDP. Let's go to GDP in India. This just came out. If I can find this now. So here is this. This is from a Pakistani account, so take this with a grain of salt. But apparently, India has been miscalculating its GDP growth by 1 to 1.5% on average each year from 2005 to 2011, and then 1.5 to 2% from 2012 onwards. They stated overall GDP might be inflated by as much as 22% and consumption by over 30%. So I tend to believe this. India is probably less guilty of this than other countries. I bet Pakistan is more guilty of this than India. So, we have to take all of this on a relative basis. I would say the US is and other Western countries, their GDP is going to be more legitimate. There's less of a reason to lie. There is, like in recession periods, there might be an incentive to fudge the numbers, and instead of like a negative 0.5% growth, they say it's 0%, or something like that. How much do they fudge that? I mean, that's up to you. There's definitely some fudging going on, but how much is that? It's not nearly this bad and in this one direction. For these type of numbers, you have to go to developing countries. Okay, and developing countries have a massive incentive to overreport their GDP. So if they're trying to get a bunch of foreign direct investment, lending, people, Western businesses opening up manufacturing, opening up even like retail outlets or other things in those countries, they're going to want to appear like they're growing much faster than they are. And so there's an incentive to fudge these numbers to the upside. Most definitely. And if we see India fudging things by 22%, It's their GDP today is 22% higher than it should be based if they didn't fudge all these numbers. What is it for China? I bet it's way more than that. Way more than that. I think India, they calculate their GDP the same way everyone else does, but China is unique. And maybe other like super authoritarian countries, they don't calculate GDP the way we do. They calculate it as that still doesn't work. They calculate it as we calculate it as output. Oh, sorry, we calculate it as spending. How much is spent on certain things? China calculates it as output. And so if the CCP says, hey, we want you to increase infrastructure spending by 10%, they will increase infrastructure spending by 10%. It has nothing to do with growth. It has to do with government mandates of the output. How many bridges did they produce? How many miles of road? How many miles of high speed rail? All of these things, it's the output, it's not the spending. So you have to have spending to make it really count, at least in a in a more capitalist economy, because it doesn't matter what the output is. So it doesn't matter if you build a bridge to nowhere. You shouldn't count that in GDP necessarily because it's not like actual productive spending. Okay. So they've hacked this system, the GDP calculations, to say, look, if we build 8,000 kilometers of high speed rail, that's worth $1 trillion of GDP. But guess what? It operates in the red every year. Every single mile of that track loses money, except for maybe, say, 10 miles. 10% of the tracks make money, 90% of the tracks lose money, but they can count that in their GDP. The West doesn't operate like that. That's one reason why the US doesn't have a lot of these high speed rails, because they actually have to obey supply and demand in the marketplace. And there's just not the demand to support that. So GDP is measured differently. So this is a major, major story, I think. And more of these will come out. I think over the next 20 years, we're going to see a lot of these stories come out. India, China, of course. We're going to see a ton of developing economies, say in the global south, in Africa and South America, um, maybe even Central Asia. We're going to see some of these come out and say, look, we have overestimated our GDP by maybe 50% over the last 50 years. So anyway, that's what we got for that. Let's see, next topic. Oh, wait. Along these same lines, we have the US economy. So all these other economies are going to be struggling, but here we have the US economy. The industrial economy is starting to ramp. Flatbed trucking tender volumes has taken out an all-time high, eclipsing last year's steel and aluminum tariff pull forward. You can see hitting new all-time highs. So this is flatbed, those big flatbed trucks, not the container trucks, but the flatbed that are moving around bulk goods, bulk aluminum, bulk steel, that kind of stuff. And this is just taking off. So we are in the early innings, as he says, early innings of a manufacturing renaissance. This is what this should look like, and it's right on time. So as the other economies that are highly dependent on Middle East oil, as they get affected, the US is more insulated from that. And we're also reshoring a lot of these things from the tariffs. So it's a one, two, three. I mean, this is almost a complete wipeout for the United States in the favor of the United States versus the rest of the world. And guess what? They're not willing to send their navies to patrol the Persian Gulf, to patrol the Strait of Hormuz. And they're the ones that want the US to keep it open. What if the US just says, nah, nah, nah. We did our goal here. We're just going to be bombing. We're going to make sure that the Iranian people get a new government, maybe bring in the old Shah, whatever, revamp their government, let them vote on it, and then We've done that. We don't care about this straight. We don't care about keeping this open. Actually, you know what? We're going to close it to Chinese oil. Talk about a complete upending of the situation. Okay, Besant said something else here as well. Let's take a listen to this one.
Shore production. The ultimate purpose of tariffs is to reshore production. The revenues are a very nice incidental in the way. In a way, it's a payback for the offshoring, for the unfair trade practices. But at the end of the day, we want to reshore manufacturing in the U.S., especially strategic manufacturing. The ultimate purpose of...
All right. So there he says the ultimate purpose of the tariffs is to reshore production, which is what we're seeing there in the trucking stats. All right, so let's go into this a little bit. Let me see if there's any comments here. Spock again, primary goal is messing with China, in my opinion. Yeah. Yeah, the primary, well, I wouldn't say that's the primary goal. To be honest, in my opinion, I think that is a beautiful symmetry of this whole situation. I really do think Trump, uh, when he survived that assassination attempt, I think it was a spiritual experience. It was almost a spiritual experience for the country, I think, when he survived the assassination attempt. And he stood up, blood on his ear and on his face, and he raised his fist and said, "Fight, fight." Spiritual. That was a spiritual moment for people. I think he was changed as an individual. I think he thinks he's doing the right thing by attacking Iran, by attacking Venezuela, maybe even getting Cuba. We haven't even talked about this, but Cuba has now said they're going to be allowing in FBI agents. It looks like there's a very good possibility that within the next couple weeks here, we could see some major movement out of Cuba, and Cuba could become at least have a new government, if not become some sort of protectorate or territory of the United States. I could see that happening as well. So I think Trump really is wanting to do what's best, what he feels is his duty and his responsibility. You guys might not think that. I can totally see how you wouldn't think that. But I believe it's one of those situations where, you know, um, what's there's a couple sayings like future favor or fortune favors the bold, um, or that there's a religious saying like, God helps those who help themselves. Yeah. If you do the right thing, then you'll have more than you put in. You'll get more out of it if you just do the right thing. And I think Trump is doing the right thing, and it just happens to be that all of these things are sliding into place. Venezuela, Iran, Cuba, the Don Roe Doctrine, protecting America's interests. And yeah, you could say that these are foreign wars, that we shouldn't do these foreign wars. We should be isolationists. And I'm very, very sympathetic to that argument. But you have to also balance that with the idea that all of this terrorist funding, not only the funding for actual terrorism attacks, but the funding through these NGOs to fund these universities, to bring up all this cultural Marxism in the United States, to bring in the fentanyl, to attack the people, the United States people, to chop off, kids' body parts, to have this radical feminism take over. And so all of this terrorist funding not only is terrorism in itself, they're doing this terrorism in the Venezuelan Maduro versus the Venezuelan people and neighbors, Guyana, Colombia, they always had to worry about Maduro. Funding of international drug cartels and stuff. But it all comes back as well to funding of problems in the United States, with through Dominion and the voting machines and all this stuff. So all of these things are linked. And I think Trump really does think he's doing the right thing, and there's synergy behind it. Venezuela, Iran, Cuba, and it's ultimately going to end in China. Now, I don't think we're going to ever invade China. I don't think we're ever going to invade Iran either. There might be a case where we put a few boots on the ground just right on the coast of the Strait of Hormuz. That's possible. I think that's unlikely, like maybe a 10% chance that that happens. But we're not going to invade the whole country. We're not going to fight China either. China is very unstable right now. They're not going to go after Taiwan. They need oil to prosecute a war. They don't have that luxury right now. All right. Okay, so here is this one thing I tweeted. I'm gonna make sure I pop this into Telegram. Guys, again, if you are watching on YouTube, Twitter, Kick, wherever you guys are watching. Oh, I want to put that in the main chat. Sorry. Main chat. I am streaming on all those platforms, as well as Telegram, where the main community is. So check out the Telegram community. All right. So this chart here is showing liberal versus conservative fertility. And these are the decades, or these are the years, 1945 through 1949. It took me a while to figure out exactly what they were talking about here. I thought they were talking about age cohort down here, but this is actual years. So if you were born in 1940 through 1944 and you are conservative, your fertility rate is 2.14. If you're a liberal born in those years, it's 1.67. So pretty big discrepancy. And you can see that for all of the people born in these different years, all the conservatives have a higher birth rate. So if you were born in 1975 through 1979 and you're conservative, your fertility rate's 2.36. If you're liberal, it's 1.69. So you can see this is a massive differential. And you're talking about millions and millions and millions of people. I don't know how many millions they're born every year. Let me see. Okay, 3.6 are born every year. So in a 5-year time span, that's going to be what? About 18, 17, 18 million. So each one of these year cohorts, they line up with about 18 million babies born. And that would be 10, let's say 10 or 11 million conservative babies to 5, 6, 7 million liberal babies. And your political affiliation is highly heritable. It's highly heritable. And so this is tipping the scales more and more conservative each generation, or each generation. Some people say that immigration will fight this, but really immigrants are technically conservative. Okay, if you're a Catholic immigrant from South America, Central America, you're Catholic, you are technically a conservative, right? Your views on marriage, your views on abortion, your views on so many different things. You're probably more anti-socialist because socialism ruined your country, or communism ruined your country, like for the Cubans. or the Venezuelans that came here. So technically, you're more conservative, but they vote more liberal most of the time, at least the first generation. I don't know how it is in the second generation, but that is turning. Hispanics, Trump got around 50% for the male Hispanic vote. So Hispanics are moving more conservative because the liberals are going so far off the deep end on the left. So immigration doesn't necessarily equal more liberals either. To offset this fertility could be what makes the difference. So that was that. Let's go into this other chart. And of course, I think this is happening everywhere in the West, but conservative fertility, you can see by this year, by these year cohorts, what is the advantage? And man, those in my age group, born in 80 to 84, it's 64% higher fertility for conservatives than for liberals. That's massive. But look how long this advantage has lasted. You know, all of these people, 80, 84, they're voting now. All those children to this cohort, they're voting now. 64%. And we've seen a lot of the younger generation has been more and more conservative. I think it's still, if you just looked at it, liberal versus conservative, they're still the majority liberal as young people coming in their early 20s voting in their first election or whatever. But it used to be 80%. Now it might be 60%, right? Conservatism is growing. And as you age, you get more conservative anyway. So not only is the entire population aging and slowly becoming more conservative, the conservative people have more children and their political persuasions are highly heritable. And so there's going to be a higher percentage of young people that are conservative as well. And as they get older, they're going to become more and more conservative. So this is a recipe for a massive, massive shift away from conservatism. And if we can just stem the tide of immigration for 5 to 10 years, this is going to have a massive, massive effect on the voting demographics of the country. So there you go. That's that. Let's see what else we have. I have nothing else on my schedule. See if there's any more comments. No. All right. Let's take a look at the charts again real quick. Oil continuing to come down, now 94. It was $95 when we started talking today. Again, I expect that to, whenever this wraps up, the overall trend is still for lower oil. This is not a supply and demand issue. This is a financial delivery issue. And once the financial delivery issue gets wrapped up and fixed, there's going to be a massive glut of oil, a massive glut of backup. So that's going to push the price lower. S&P 500, positive on the day. We'll see where that goes. US 10-year, not moving very much. Dollar, again, the dollar is coming back down under 100. Is this a real breakout of 100, or is it going to be a monkey hammer down? Again, don't know. So let's see. Is it going to be a big hammer down on the price? No, don't go over 100 yet. But eventually this is going to break upward. We could say this is like kind of a megaphone pattern that we're going to break up from. So we will see how that develops. And finally, let's do Bitcoin. 73,999, right around 74,000. Actually, let's go into macro a little bit more. Take a look at gasoline. Gasoline, these are gasoline futures in the US. They have broken higher, but they were higher back here in 2022. And if this is a top, which it might be getting close to a top, I think it's probably going to come right back down to where we were. Let's look at some of these other type of commodities. How about copper? Copper up on the day, but looking a little bit top heavy. Could be somewhat of a head and shoulders pattern here, going down. We saw something similar here on a smaller scale, and it broke out. But for copper as well, for that to really accelerate higher and maintain higher prices, you need economic growth. So all of these things or a lot of these things we talk about, the U.S. 10-year yields, oil, copper, gasoline, all those things need higher economic growth to sustain higher prices. And if we're not getting higher economic growth, we're actually in the middle of a war, which is detrimental to economic growth. Then these commodities cannot maintain a higher price. They can go higher temporarily, but one thing that Doomberg says all the time, or he has been saying more recently, is it's really hard to predict when some huge Six Sigma event is going to occur. But once it occurs, there's an opportunity to fade it. Right? That's how I view this, what's going on with oil, okay? And gold and everything. If there's some major break, this was a financial snap. This was not a supply and demand issue, okay? That a long building supply and demand issue. This was a financial snap. And once this type of event happens, the best thing to do is to go the other direction. So there you go. Let's take a look at some of these other commodities. Aluminum. Aluminum is also very high, but it's not as high as the great financial crisis, all-time high. So we will see where that goes. Lumber, nothing significant to report. Natural gas, this is European. It's starting to thunder here, guys. Hopefully I don't get the internet cut out. This is the US natural gas, way, way lower. You can see the European natural gas is back up again higher. Baltic Dry Index. So this is commodities shipped not on cargo containers or crude oil, but those dry bulk goods. They are not breaking out. This whole scenario has not really affected the dry bulk goods situation. It's mainly just the oil thing, right? And real quick before lightning strikes, let's go to, oh man, where I had a whole nother list, but I can't find it now. It was of commodities. I'll have to search for that again. But anyway, okay, guys, that's going to be it. Make sure you check out roguemacro.substack.com to follow all my writings. I'll be putting out a blog post there today, probably one as well on my other site, which is bitcoinandmarkets.com. You can sign up for the free tier on both of those, but the paid tiers are together. So if you are a paid pro member on either site, both sites will get the same paid tier. So, all right. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you guys all on the next one. Bye.